agrochemicals have not come up to discussion at all. In fact, they should have received more, uh, attention, but that has not happened. And why, I think, is still a question. But what we understand, the way international negotiations or international conventions or all the international activities which are organized. I think this climate change has been a very distinct process, and over the last 10 years, I think it has become more prominent because we are facing a serious crisis arising out of global warming. Now, in the recent 3-4 years, we have seen a lot of disturbance in the nature, and extreme weather events have been recorded. So now I think people started believing in the reports of International Panel on Climate Change, which has been warning about this climate crisis. And more, all these scientific assessments, they are looking at carbon emissions, and carbon emissions which are contributing to greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and then the global warming arising out of that greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So I don't think they have looked at the many other aspects which have interrelation with the current status of environment, because one of the principal you know problems which have been identified earlier, it's not that we are looking at it now, is about the nature and the cycles of nature which have been destroyed. So this natural carbon cycle, which has been there, which is working from oceans to forests, soil. So all these, natural resources were involved in this natural carbon cycle, and that's how most of the carbon was found either in the soil or in the oceans or in the forests. So when deforestation started happening, and a lot of human interference started happening in the oceans, and of course, soil is also being disturbed. So all these three major natural resources have been interfered with in the last 300 years, not just in the last 10-15 years. So gradually, I think the human interference has exceeded the carrying capacity of this natural carbon cycle, and then eventually we have seen the load of carbon increasing in atmosphere, and not in its natural state, either in the soil or in forests or in the ocean. So this being there, I think what this IPCC reports or the scientific assessment reports have been focusing is on fossil fuel burning. So especially coal has been identified, and emissions coming from coal or fossil fuel usage has been identified as that. But I think the another 2-3 factors which have been there is the destruction of environment, because the carbon cycle, the buildup of carbon cycle involves a lot of biodiversity, as both the speakers mentioned earlier. So either in the soil or in the surface, or the on the surface of the soil. So this diversity and the interaction between this diversity, I think that has been playing a major role in this carbon cycle. And this diversity, biodiversity, is being killed by many methods, but one of the major methods is now agrochemicals. So that's how we have now lost at least 70% of the non-human life species. So recent reports, even in the last 15 days, several reports have been released, and including World Wide Fund for Nature, they have released, UNEP has released, many other international organizations have been studying this phenomena, especially the biodiversity. So while the human species, their population is growing now. UN 3 days back has released that human population is increasing to has increased to 8 billion, but it is slowing down, and it might reach 9 billion in the next 15 years, and 10 billion in the next 22 years. So it might take 37 years to build another 2 billion. But then the population is growing in unevenly. So it is happening in areas like Africa and Afro-Asian region. So that is again impinging on the species and the species diversity. So there have been studies, which showed that apart from the humans, the wildlife species are lost heavily. That is basically because of deforestation, but also chemicalization of food systems. So because of this, for years and years, I think gradually this biodiversity is lost. Second major stream, which I feel is, as hybridization and chemicalization of agriculture began, eventually there is completely focus on increasing the yield, and then agriculturization as a livelihood and as a income, income generating livelihood, and also as a part of the economy, has led to widening of agricultural areas. So unlike 100 years back or in the traditional societies, food was also diverse. Food was not only from crops. So we used to get food from uncultivated areas. We used to get food from forests, which are again not cultivated. So there are many areas which have been contributing to the food basket of human beings. And of course, the interactive food chain between human and non-human species was also a robust mechanism was there. So, but as agriculturization began, and this agriculture started using more and more chemicals, especially fertilizers. It started with fertilizers, and gradually pesticide usage has increased. And now we have reached, we are in this direction of genetic modification of species, especially seeds and germplasm, and even livestock has begun. So now from hybrids to uh, genetically modified seeds to now gene edited seeds and livestock, we have come to that scenario, and intertwined with this kind of technologies, pesticides or herbicides. So now more and more herbicide tolerant plants or seeds have been introduced not all over world, but I think that's a direction which modern agriculture is giving. So again, recent studies show that just 15 meat and cattle companies, meat and dairy companies, uh, 15 companies, just 15 companies, they maintain large farms of animals, basically for meat and also for dairy. So these 15 companies together been documented for their carbon emissions, and it said they combinedly exceed at least three big nations like Russia, Britain, and Germany. So the combined emissions of this kind of business model, this kind of food production model is giving leading to carbon emissions. So on one hand, agrochemicals are being used, and on the other hand, this food system is being transformed basically on the back of this agrochemical based production. So these two together are now have led to biodiversity loss, soil diversity loss, and then, of course, ensured buildup of carbon in the atmosphere than in the soil or than in the forest areas. So most of us think deforestation is only for timber, but deforestation is also because of the spread of agriculture, because the agriculture areas gradually are shifting because of the this loss of fertility. As both the speakers mentioned, how these pesticides and fertilizers, they are making soil inert. So over a period, these soils become they can't be used for food production. So fertile in search of fertile soil, I think human societies are deforesting the forest areas and destroying biodiversity in the name of monoculture systems. So deforestation is not happening just because of timber or use of wood, but is also because of the expansion of agriculture. Now, the other factor which is pushing agriculture into forests is urbanization. So, as urban areas are increasing, the land under agriculture is decreasing, and these agriculture areas are extending into forest areas. So, even the minimal 8%, 9% forest areas are also now getting converted into agriculture areas. So this gradual shift of land use from a natural process to the usage for urban areas, and then the agriculture, and from agriculture towards forest areas. I think this is also impinging on the climate change processes. So again, this is enabled by the technologies which are employed in agriculture. So these technologies now include started with the fertilizers, pesticides, and genetically modified seeds. So overall, I think one is the food transformation is required. When we are discussing in climate change today at Egypt, they are not gone into the depths of the food systems, because even the human species are under threat because of these food systems, as other species have already been wiped out. So when we are discussing climate change, in the last 10 days, there are a number of groups have tried to bring attention to food systems, biodiversity, and the interactive systems of between natural resources, water, forests, soil, and food systems. So I think climate change conference has not yet taken up. There have been some discussions under one stream of no, negotiations. They said it is Coronavian joint work program on agriculture, and in fact, today or tomorrow, a draft text is supposed to come out of that. So we need to see if they are going to include some of these suggestions which are being made by the civil society for long. But now, of course, forest area conservation, for biodiversity conservation is accepted, but as a program of action, it has not yet come about. And secondly, this industrial agriculture, like I mentioned, this meat and dairy companies, and then the large scale farms, which are completely monoculture, which we are seeing in developed countries. I think those are still not under the radar of this climate change negotiations. So that means they are not under pressure to change. In fact, it is happening the other way, outside climate change, because in Bali, the G20 summit happened. Just yesterday, they finished a 3-day summit where top 20 countries have gathered, and they discussed the food security as one of the major issues. But food security, again, they are looking at from the point of quantity rather than quality. And both the speakers have mentioned how food quality is being compromised because of pesticides and agrochemicals. So I think G20 discussion is happening, but they are looking at more and more inclusion of these same technologies which have contributed to the destruction of natural carbon cycles and natural carrying capacity of soil and other natural resources. So given that, I'm not yet sure whether these food systems will uh, be the focus of national policies at all. Uh, and in fact, there is other pressure which we are seeing because of inflation. In the last 6 months, of course, after the COVID pandemic, cost of living crisis has become a major issue in all the countries across the globe, and food costs have increased. So food access has decreased, and the United Nations has given a report saying that at least 60% of the global population is now facing hunger. And yesterday, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he said in next 3 years, we are going to face severe famine, and he has identified 5 locations which are already reeling under famine conditions. Now, famine is different from drought. Famine is about access to food. Famine is not about a lack of production or lack of resources for food production. It is more about access to food. So I think these famine conditions have been warned by UN Secretary General, and he says we need urgent decisions on how to increase food security. So this food security has become a global focus issue, but inherent in the security, most of the discussion is on again and again is on quantity, productivity, yield. So how to increase so that this huge population can get food, rather than on the nutrition, the quality and integrity of the food which we are producing. So this can't be separated. The quantity and quality cannot be separated. So that is where I think the discussion should happen on the methods and technologies of food production and also fiber production. So and it's not just food separately. The fiber and food go together. So Indian traditional agriculture systems, they always had this link between food and fiber. In fact, sometimes for fiber is also a very essential requirement for healthy life. So food and fiber go together, but I think increasingly the focus on only food and that too cereals. I think that is again a major problem. Like we have lost our food diversity. Now almost 70% of food is constituted by only three cereals. Rice, wheat, and soya bean. So, but we had 600 different crops. So we have lost much of this diversity, and within each crop, again, we had a diverse of varieties, so which responded to the different agroclimatic conditions. So I think this loss of diversity within the agricultural systems which have been developed over centuries, I think even that is a major focus of attention. It should be a major focus of attention when we are discussing food security. So right now, if you look at just three processes at international level, one is this climate change negotiations which are happening as part of COP27, and then G20 summit, which is also trying to increase investments in industrial agriculture. And then third, we are looking at the overall economics which are being influenced by the global trade under WTO. So these three processes appear to be distinct, but I think they are interlinked. So one of the fundamental changes which we can seek is knocking out the this ability of this global corporate system to produce chemicals, and that can happen by focusing on fossil fuel, phasing out of fossil fuels. So climate change is discussing mostly coal, but not on oil and gas, because gas is again one of the ingredients for fertilizers, and of course crude oil, petroleum is also a source for number of chemicals, including pesticides, herbicides, and many other products. So I think if we focus on phasing out all the fossil fuels. So the slogan is let fossil fuels remain underground. We should not take them out, and we have to build economies which without these fossil fuels. And we have number of alternative energy systems, including increasing the biomass as part of our energy system. So biomass based energy system is being talked about as a long term vision. So I think given that alone, if we are united in asking fossil fuel phase out by 2030, and the next 80 years, if that happens, I think only then our food systems will be, will get improved, and then the population which is dependent on those foods, not only humans, but also the other species, they'll find a life of their own. So ultimately, we have to focus on fossil fuel, phase out completely. So I hope we will be able to achieve that in the next 1 or 2 years. Otherwise, I think human existence is under a severe threat, and all IPCC reports tell us that with global warming, even the plant species are going to be impacted. We may not be able to produce food at all because the temperature changes. I think many plants will lose their ability to, multiply or pick up minerals from the soils or, lead to fruits. So once that kind of changes have come, so we can't even continue, life on this earth. So, given that, I think it is important that we immediately focus on fossil fuel phase out. So, I'll stop here, and if there are any questions, we can take, or if the other speakers, if they want to add anything, they can add. Uh, Otherwise, I think we can close this uh, seminar.